Kant's distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. Previously, we saw that the question, is metaphysics possible, lies at the heart of Kant's critical philosophy. Let's try to understand Kant's detailed examination by understanding his answer to the question, what is knowledge? According to Kant, for something to be knowledge, it must first be a judgment. That is, it must consist of a subject and a predicate. For example, the thought of world alone is not knowledge, but the statement or judgment, the Earth is a planet, is knowledge. Therefore, every piece of knowledge is a proposition or judgment. However, conversely, while every piece of knowledge is a judgment, not every judgment is knowledge. Kant first divided judgments into two categories, analytic and synthetic judgments, and explained this distinction in his work titled Prolegomena as follows. Analytic judgments express something in the predicate that is already contained in the concept of the subject, but has not been explicitly and consciously thought of. When I say all objects occupy space, I do not expand my concept of an object in any way, but merely analyze it. Because occupying space is already thought of in this concept, even if it is not explicitly stated before this judgment. Therefore, this judgment is analytic. On the other hand, the proposition, some objects are heavy, contains something in the predicate that is not really thought of in the general concept of a body. It therefore increases my knowledge by adding something to my concept. It must therefore be called a synthetic judgment. So, according to Kant, analytic judgments do not add anything new to a concept, meaning they do not expand our knowledge. They are merely judgments that serve to analyze the concept. Synthetic judgments, on the other hand, are judgments that add something new to a concept that is not already present in that concept, and therefore increase and expand our knowledge. Consequently, Kant arrives at the idea that only synthetic judgments constitute knowledge. On the other hand, according to Kant, not every synthetic judgment constitutes scientific knowledge. For a judgment to constitute knowledge in a scientific sense, it must be true under all conditions, and the relationship between the subject and the predicate in this judgment must be necessary. For example, when I say the weather is hot, I'm making a synthetic judgment. However, the content of this judgment is temporary and not necessary. The weather may be cold tomorrow. Therefore, the synthetic judgment, the weather is hot, does not constitute scientific knowledge. On the other hand, when I say heat expands, I am making a judgment that is always true and necessary, and therefore expressing scientific knowledge. From this point, Kant divides synthetic judgments into two, a priori and a posteriori. Synthetic a posteriori judgments do not express necessity, and cannot constitute knowledge because they are based solely on experience. However, synthetic a priori judgments express a necessity independently of experience. Therefore, synthetic a priori judgments are judgments that both expand our knowledge and are necessary and universally valid. So, Kant's answer to the question, what is knowledge, can be given as knowledge is synthetic a priori judgment. From this point, Kant limits the field of synthetic a priori judgments to pure mathematics, physics, that is, natural sciences and metaphysics. Consequently, Kant will address the fundamental question of the critique of pure reason, is metaphysics possible? Within the framework of these three questions. First, how is pure mathematics possible? Second, how is pure natural science possible? And third, how is metaphysics possible as a science? In short, we can say that Kant focuses on this question. Is a metaphysics that is scientific, just like mathematics and physics, possible? In other words, as Kant states in the Critique of Pure Reason and Prolegomena, how are synthetic a priori propositions possible? As we have seen, Kant considered questioning whether metaphysical knowledge is possible, that is, whether synthetic a priori knowledge is possible, as the primary task of his critical philosophy. He named the philosophical system he created in this context transcendental doctrine of elements, in which he sets out the elements of knowledge. It is possible to consider the concept of transcendental, which is also translated into our language as transcendent, in two contexts. Secondly, as we have seen before, Kant's philosophy is a critique of traditional theories of knowledge. In this sense, it is possible to see Kant's transcendental philosophy as a superior philosophy that surpasses the understandings of knowledge put forward before him and at the same time eliminates the errors and deficiencies of these understandings. Therefore, transcendental philosophy is essentially more of a philosophical method than a complete philosophical system. On the other hand, this transcendental philosophy method, as a method for examining the nature and functions of reason, tries to determine the limits of knowledge. Therefore, the transcendental method is not about the knowledge of this or that object, but a method of examining knowledge itself. Thus, it does not aim at transcendent knowledge in the sense of exceeding or going beyond human reason. On the contrary, it is a research method aimed at the transcendental, that is, in the sense of determining the limits of the human mind, and therefore the limits of the realm of knowledge that transcends the mind. The first stage of transcendental philosophy is Kant's understanding of transcendental aesthetic. Transcendental aesthetic holds a very important place in Kant's philosophy, so much so that if we liken transcendental philosophy to a structure, transcendental aesthetic acts as a scaffolding. Therefore, it is not possible to construct the structure without setting up this scaffolding. On the other hand, the point to note is that Kant does not use the concept of aesthetics in the sense that we give it today. The word aesthetics, coming from ancient Greek, essentially refers to meanings such as sensation, perception, sensory perception. In this sense, Kant's transcendental aesthetic is a theory about human sensibility and perception. Kant argued that the raw material of all our knowledge is given to us by the senses. It is not possible for the mind to attain any knowledge or even form a single idea without receiving this raw material through the senses. Kant explained how it is possible to receive this raw material with his theory of transcendental aesthetic. In other words, transcendental aesthetic is basically the investigation of the elements and principles of human sensibility that are independent of experience or pre-experiential. That is, a priori elements and principles. When Kant started this investigation, he prioritized explaining the basic concepts of transcendental aesthetic. According to Kant, what provides us with our knowledge by directly establishing its relationship with the object and using it as a tool for our thought is intuition. However, for this to happen, the object must be given to us, that is, it must be ready. In other words, the object must affect the mind in a certain way. It is through sensibility that objects are given to us by affecting our minds, and from this we derive our intuitions. To put it simply, what an antenna does for a radio, sensibility does for a human being. Objects cannot be given to us without our sensibility, that is, they cannot affect our minds. The effect of the object on sensibility is called sensation. As long as we are affected by the object and thanks to our sensibility, we obtain sensation, that is, we sense. When our intuition is associated with its object through sensation, this is called empirical intuition. Kant gives the name appearance, phenomenon, to the object of empirical intuition that has not yet been shaped by the forms of space and time. What corresponds to sensation in appearance phenomenon is matter. The matter of all appearance is given to us a posteriori. According to Kant, appearances are given to us in a plurality, dispersion, and complexity. What arranges this plurality in certain relationships is form. Form is the only possibility for the organization and shaping of sensations that are in a plurality and dispersion. On the other hand, according to Kant, the form of appearance is not given to us through sensation, like the matter of appearance, that is, a posteriori. Moreover, the form itself is not a sensation. In other words, form is neither a sensation nor sensible. Form is ready in our minds a priori, before all sensations, and separate from them. From this point, Kant introduces the concept of pure intuition. According to Kant, a design that does not contain anything related to sensation is pure. Intuition that does not contain anything related to sensation is called pure intuition. When we remove from our thoughts about the design of an object, for example, divisibility, substance, power, etc., and therefore whatever belongs to sensation in the object, only space and form remain from empirical intuition. Therefore, according to Kant, space and form belong to pure intuition. Space and form, as forms of sensibility, are present in our minds a priori. Apart from space, which is the form of outer sensation, the form of inner sensation, which enables the mind to intuit itself, is time. While space is the condition for the possibility of empirical intuition, sensibility, time is the condition for our inner sense. We can better understand space and time, which Kant considers as pure intuitions, with the following example. Imagine that we are born with blue-tinted glasses, and these glasses are never taken off throughout our lives. When we are later asked what color any object is, for example, a tree, we would say that the tree is blue. Because our perception of the tree would have been shaped by the blue-tinted glasses and entered our minds in this way, it would not be possible for us to know the true color of the tree. According to Kant, space and time, the a priori forms of sensibility, are like the glasses in our example. In other words, we do not sense things as they are in themselves, but as they are shaped by the forms of sensibility. After defining and explaining all these concepts, Kant moves on to the expositions of space and time. He presents these expositions in two ways: metaphysical exposition and transcendental exposition. Kant first shows that space and time are a priori necessary and pure intuitions, and calls this metaphysical exposition. Once this is shown, space and time are explained as principles that make synthetic a priori knowledge possible, which is the transcendental exposition. Understanding the concepts we have explained above will become easier with these expositions. In this section, we will continue to introduce Kant's view of transcendental aesthetic, and we will also explain his groundbreaking Copernican revolution. Metaphysical and transcendental expositions of space and time. We have seen that transcendental aesthetic is basically the investigation of the elements and principles of human sensibility that are independent of experience or pre-experiential, in other words, a priori elements and principles. The two most fundamental of these a priori elements are the pure intuitions called space and time. According to Kant, space and time are the fundamental conditions that make our inner and outer experiences, that is, our inner sense of ourselves and our outer sensibility towards the external world, possible. To show that these are necessary conditions, Kant puts forward the transcendental and metaphysical expositions of space and time. He expresses the nature of these expositions in his work, Critique of Pure Reason, as follows. By schematism, I understand the pure design of what belongs to a concept, although not its full scope. But if the schematism encompasses the concept by exhibiting it as a priori given, it is metaphysical schematization. By transcendental schematization, I understand the explanation of a concept as a principle by which the possibility of other synthetic a priori knowledge can be understood. Thus, 1. These pieces of knowledge must really arise from the concept at hand, and 2. These pieces of knowledge must be possible only on the basis of an explanation given for the concept at hand. According to Kant, the association of sensations with things outside themselves, the abstraction of external things from their relations with each other through experience, is not possible. In other words, we do not form the design of space by starting from the qualities of external things or their relations with each other. On the contrary, experience itself would not be possible if we did not have the design of space a priori. So much so that, according to Kant, we can imagine that there is no object in space, but we cannot imagine that there is no space. Thus, the design of space is the a priori condition for the possibility of external appearances. According to Kant, if space were a design acquired through experience, that is, a posteriori, then the principles we have in the field of geometry, the science that gives us knowledge of the properties of space, would also have to be acquired a posteriori. However, the fact that there is only one straight line segment between 2 points, for example, is not a principle derived from experience. If it were, This principle would have been derived by induction. But according to Kant, we cannot establish a priori necessary principles by induction. We can only make generalizations. According to Kant, all the designs and concepts we have about space can essentially be thought of as parts of one and the same space, and they are based on the limitations of this space. In other words, it cannot be said that all these parts, as components that make up a single space, precede space in principle. On the contrary, these divisions of space that we make can only be thought of within space. According to Kant, the science that gives us knowledge of the properties of space is geometry. Moreover, as Kant shows us, all pure mathematical judgments, and therefore the judgments of geometry, are synthetic a priori judgments. Starting from this acceptance, Kant reached this important conclusion. For such a knowledge of space to be possible, our design of space must be an a priori intuition. In other words, the design of space must be a pure intuition, not an empirical design that we acquire through experience. Because all geometric propositions are apodictic, that is, necessarily true propositions, according to Kant, experience only shows us that something has this or that nature, but it cannot show us why it has this nature and why it cannot have another nature. Therefore, every proposition that is thought of with necessity, and thus every geometric proposition, must be a priori. As a result of all this, if the intuition of space were not present in our minds as the form of outer sensation, which enables us to be affected by objects and thus acquire their immediate designs, synthetic a priori and apodictic knowledge would not be possible. Kant puts forward the metaphysical and transcendental expositions of time in the same way as those of space. While space is the a priori form of outer appearances, that is, the condition of outer appearances as they appear to us, time is the a priori condition of inner appearances, that is, the appearances of the soul. In addition, the following generalization can be made. Space is the pure form of our outer intuition, and is therefore limited to being only the immediate condition of outer appearances. However, according to Kant, whether the object of our representations is external things or not, ultimately all representations belong to our inner state as determinations of our minds. In other words, whether the objects are outside or inside, all representations are internal to us in terms of their being in our minds. This inner state, that is the mental state, belongs to time, which is the formal condition of our inner intuition. Therefore, according to Kant, time is the a priori condition of all appearances in general. It is the immediate condition of inner appearances, and thus the indirect condition of outer appearances. In short, time is the condition of these temporal relationships in which all intuitions are given. According to Kant, every concept belonging to sensibility other than space and time requires the empirical, that is, every concept outside of space and time is a posteriori. So much so that, for example, even the concept of motion, which is formed by the combination of space and time, requires the perception of something moving. Similarly, for example, the concept of change, which is related to time, is not a priori, because it is not time itself that changes, but what is in time. Therefore, according to Kant, since we do not have any concepts other than space and time that are a priori, the subject of transcendental aesthetic is limited to space and time only. In Kant's words, transcendental aesthetic encompasses no more than space and time. The result of transcendental aesthetic. Kant's transcendental aesthetic aims to show what kind of knowledge we can acquire under what conditions. With transcendental aesthetic, Kant wanted to reveal this. The object of all our experience and knowledge is appearances, and knowledge is acquired through thought, starting from pure intuition. But does the appearance, as it is given to us, that is, as it affects our minds, allow us to acquire knowledge about the true nature of things themselves? Kant's answer to this question is no.